Hi, everybody. This is attorney Elizabeth Potts Weinstein. I'm 8 minutes late because for some reason this would not work. I actually had to restart my computer. And why did that work? Who knows? That's just one of the secrets of IT is if stuff doesn't work, you restart your computer. So anyway, today we're answering questions that you might have about small business law topics. So trademarks, contracts, forming LLCs, DBAs, any of that kind of stuff. I have one question that's already in the queue, and then I have some other questions that people have asked. But of course, if you have any more questions, feel free to post them in the chat. So the first question is from Tori, and Tori says, "Hi, Elizabeth. My business will be a sole proprietorship in California. Since sole proprietorships are not registered with the state, how can I protect my business name from someone forming a limited partnership or LLC or corporation or whatever with the same name?" This is a great question because it is very true that if you start a business, and actually, if you start a LLC or corporation, someone else can start a business with the same name from the perspective they can file the forms and start up that same business. So if you have a sole proprietorship that is either your own, like your own legal name, or you make up a trade name and you get a DBA and stuff, that does not keep someone else from getting an LLC or corporation in your state or in any other states with the same name. If you want to protect that name, that's when you get a trademark with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. The trademark is going to cost a bunch of money, and you may want an attorney to help you with that. But it is any name, which may include a business name, that you're using in commerce, in interstate commerce, but you're selling things, in conjunction with the product or service that identifies the source of that product or service as your business. So sometimes business names are trademarkable. Sometimes they're not because you use some other word to describe your products or services. But that's really what you want to look at to protect the name of business. Now, even if you have a trademark for XYZ, whatever that name is of your business, it doesn't mean that someone can't go get an LLC with the same name. It's not like it's not automatically prohibited, but if they start using that name, then you can send them a cease and desist letter and sue them and whatever. They also look at the category that you're in. So if you're selling t-shirts, but somebody else is doing life coaching, those are very different businesses. And so your trademark is only going to cover you in the t-shirt, clothing, that kind of stuff area. And the other person could have a business with the same name, but they do life coaching, for example. So it's something that you just want to think about from the perspective of protecting it. Is nothing's going to be a slam dunk from someone else being able to get the same name. And actually, even if you got the name of your LLC in California, someone could get a business of the exact same name LLC in Nevada. What would impact that is if whether or not you have a trademark, because trademarks from the United States Patent and Trademark Office cover the entire United States. So let me look and see if there's I don't see any other questions right now. So I have some questions that are queued up from other places. So I'll go ahead and answer those. This is actually a little bit related. So one question that I've gotten over and over again is when you're filing things with various government entities, when you're getting a DBA, when you're getting a trademark, when you're getting your business license, when you're getting your seller's permit for sales taxes, any of those kind of things, they will ask, who is the owner of this business? The word owner means different things and different connotations. A lot of people will think, well, I have an LLC, but I own the LLC, so I'm the owner. For most of those forms, in most the ways they're using the word owner, if you have an LLC or corporation, the owner of the DBA, the owner of the trademark, the owner of the business license is the LLC. So in that owner blank, you're putting such and such LLC or such and such incorporated. Occasionally, on certain types of licenses and permits, you have to also put who owns the LLC or corporation. So for seller's permits in California, for let's see, it's business licenses in Washington State. Like there's some places where you actually have to give information about the owners of the LLC, the owners of the corporation, and you have to give. Sometimes you have to give their driver's license and all kinds of stuff for a closely held business. But most of the time, the owner is the LLC. It's the legal owner. It's a legal name of that business, of that, and which would be LLC or corporation. And then it would only be your name if it's a sole proprietorship. So another question, it's a bit of a question, a bit of a something for you to think about is a lot of times when people are starting a brand new business, they have so many YouTube videos that they've watched and so many questions that they're trying to get answered and so many things on their checklist that they're very, very overwhelmed. They're looking at LLCs, they're looking at trademarks, they have contracts, privacy policy, the website, and then also non-legal things like they're building a new website. They're doing all this brand setup stuff with getting a logo designed. And so one of the things that can happen, and I had this with many clients over the years, is that you can spend so much time and energy setting up the framework of the business, the LLC incorporation, getting all kinds of contracts, um, getting a website designed, all that. Maybe thousands of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars, that you never actually launched the business. You're stuck in all this stuff that has to get done. And so, one thing I would recommend to you, and I'm not the only person recommending it, you'll see this in many, many places, is that figure out the smallest version of your business that you can set up. So, this is the minimal viable product, the minimal viable service. The idea is there's some version of your product or service that is the most simple, straightforward, easy to explain, cheap and fast to set up version of what you plan to do and launch that as fast as you can. The thing is, you're not going to know if your business is going to work until you actually launch something. So you're not going to know whether or not people respond to your marketing. You're not going to even know if you enjoy doing this service or product unless you did it for free for people, which is another idea you can do too. You're not going to know if your marketing works for that target audience. You need to shift. Maybe you need to shift something about your products or services to respond to the market. I mean, there's all kinds of things. You may not even like the name of your business or your product. It may not make sense. People may spell it wrong every time, etc. And if you spend a ton of money setting everything up, not only may you just never even get to the launch part, you're going to have to change a lot of that stuff if you want to make changes later based upon the launch. So this is a common thing that people do in software. Not everybody. I've had clients who have paid tens of thousands of dollars, probably more than that, to another company to design an app. And it's like been 2 years and the app is not even finished because they want to put everything in that first beta version of the app. I would recommend instead of doing that, you create the most simple, straightforward version of that application, get that launched, and then you'll get feedback. And then you'll create the next version, the next version, and the next version. There's no reason to put everything in it in the beginning. It will be horribly expensive. So that applies to any kind of business that you have. You want to be able to launch something and make money on day one and test it out to see if it's viable before you put any more time and energy into it. And then you can pivot. And it's not that big of a deal because you didn't invest a huge amount of time and energy into it in the first place. So that's a tip that applies to anybody starting a business, and is a very common thing that you'll see people talking about, especially in the software industry. But I think that also applies to coaching, consulting. It applies to physical products, anything. You can always find a very simple version of what you want to launch. Okay, I'm going to go look and see if anyone, I don't see any other questions right now. If you have any questions about small business law stuff, trademarks, contracts, privacy policies, should you get an LLC, corporation, like whatever, any of that kind of stuff, please go ahead and post them in the chat, and then I'll get to those questions. Um, you're welcome, Tori. Um, so one other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, until unless we get some more questions, is how do you find an attorney or how do you get this legal stuff done? So there may be some things that you go ahead and decide to do yourself. Um, Now that online filing exists, not everywhere, but in a lot of places, it makes it a lot easier to do stuff yourself. So there's a lot of people who, file their own LLC with the state. The Secretary of State's office is usually where it is in any particular state. A lot of people will do their own copyrights. Almost everybody can file their own copyrights. A lot of people will file their own trademarks with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. You can find generators to generate privacy policies, and there's a lot of things that there's a version of it that exists that's do it yourself. One thing I do want to point out though is if you're going to do it yourself and do online filing, do it directly. Like do it directly with the trademark office. Do it directly with the state Secretary of State. Don't go through one of these online services like LegalZoom. One of these days I'm going to do a whole video on LegalZoom. Right. But fundamentally, what you're doing with someone like LegalZoom is you're filling out a form and they're literally just taking what you put in the form into another form. Like if you're going to fill out an online form and not have a lawyer give you, advice, you might as well just fill it out and to the actual place as opposed to some other place that's going to charge you hundreds of dollars just to fill out a form. It makes no sense. The online forms that LegalZoom uses are not any easier than the ones from the United States Patent and Trademark Office or the Secretary of State's office to file. So it doesn't really make sense to do that anymore. It was different many years ago when there was no online filing and someone had to like physically go to an office to file things in Sacramento. Then it made sense to pay for a service to do that. But for most things, that's not true. The one place where I still use services like that is for DBAs in California. I actually use dbastore.com. So anyway, but let's say you want a lawyer to help you. How do you find someone? And this is hard because it really does depend upon you personally. Like, so there's some people where they're fine working with a lawyer via email, via the phone, via the web. And so like someone like me works really well. I only see clients that way. I do not see clients in person anymore. But some people really need to see someone in person. Even with the whole, 2020 situation, I think people's offices are open again. And some people need to sit down with someone and talk face to face. You have to be self-aware about that. Also, that's one issue is to make this, be self-aware about what do you need from that lawyer. Do you need someone who's going to just give you their cell phone number? I don't give my cell phone number out to clients because it makes it difficult for me to focus if people are calling me randomly. But there's lawyers where you can text them and call them on their cell phone. It's just a different style of working. So be clear about what you want when you're looking for a lawyer from that kind of logistical perspective. Also need to be clear about, do you need someone who's very local to you or does it not matter? For something like a trademark, doesn't really matter because that's filed with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. A lawyer in any state can do that. Doesn't have anything to do with location. But let's say you're opening up a restaurant and you need someone to help you get all those permits through. Doesn't necessarily need to be a lawyer. It can be someone who just helps with those kind of things. But you may need someone with boots on the ground who's physically there, who has a personal relationship with local people to get all those permits through. Because opening up a restaurant is an extravaganza. It can take a really long time and I know people in San Francisco, it can take more than a year to get all the permits for a restaurant. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I'm sure that's not true everywhere with the time frame, but you may need someone local because of something like that, where you need someone who has personal relationships with local officials. Also, if you need litigation handled, you need someone who's local to that dispute. So like, I don't do litigation, but let's say I had a client, I'm here in California and I have a client who has a legal dispute in Tennessee. We're going to need somebody with boots on the ground in Tennessee to handle at least some of it. They may just be local counsel and I may do all the work if I did litigation, but you're gonna need someone local to the dispute. So it's something to think about if you need litigation. Or it may not matter at all, and you could work with someone from anywhere. So get clear about what you need there. And the last thing you really want to think about is what kind of expertise do you need? So there's a couple different kinds of expertise. One is if they need someone who's local, has local expertise. Another is, does that lawyer have any experience with businesses like yours? And so I've had clients where they had some other lawyer draft their terms and conditions for their website, and this is a lawyer who knew nothing about doing business online. And so there was tons of things that they missed because they weren't used to having online businesses. It just didn't work. You may, so having a lawyer who has the kinds of businesses in a category. So, for example, I don't represent. There was a time where I represented big, giant, large businesses, but I don't do that anymore. I represent little, teeny businesses. So there's going to be some lawyers who represent startups who are like looking for the next, Facebook or whatever. There are some lawyers who represent bigger companies, some lawyers who represent real estate investment firms. So thinking about what kind of category you're in size and the kind of industry you're in and who do they typically represent. A lot of times you can go on their website, and when you're on the website for a lawyer, you'll be able to feel out, what words are they using? What kind of business are they talking about? What kind of issues do they handle? Does that even resonate with the kind of stuff that you're doing or the kind of questions that you have? And then also the specific aspects of law that are specialties. So, for example, I don't do franchising. Franchise law is very technical. It is a uber specialty. I don't do that kind of stuff. There are lawyers who literally get certified in doing franchise law. There are lawyers who have no experience in intellectual property law. So while maybe they do a lot of contracts, but they haven't done any trademarks, patents, copyrights, any of that kind of stuff. So they can give a general high level answer, but they don't have a real specialty in that thing. So if you have an issue, you want to make sure that that lawyer has some, experience doing that kind of work to the extent that is possible. And the last thing that you're going to always consider, which is probably relatively obvious, is how do they charge you? How does the money work? So that in some states, lawyers aren't allowed to do flat fee pricing. I think Colorado might be one of the states. Like there's some states where lawyers who are admitted to practice in that state are only allowed to charge in certain ways. And so something to be aware of if your local attorney doesn't charge, set up things the way that you would prefer, it may be because they're literally not allowed to. The default way is by the hour, of course. And you want to know, are they charging like in 15-minute increments? So if you do something with them that takes 5 minutes, you have to pay 15 minutes, or if they charge you for like the actual time. Nowadays, I think back before we did everything on the computer with setting up, keeping track of billing, doing things in 5, 10, 15-minute increments made sense because just logistically it was impossible. But now you can put a little timer in your computer. So I think it only makes sense to charge in actual amount of time. Some lawyers will charge for a percentage, which could be a percentage of if it's a lawsuit of the winnings, or they might charge like if they set up your LLC and corporation and stuff, they get a cut of ownership. I don't do that for many, many reasons, but there are a section of lawyers who are setting up businesses that plan to pitch VC. And so it makes sense from that kind of a perspective to own shares in that company that they set up and take that instead of cash. Businesses I set up aren't pitching VC for the most part. A few are, but most of them are not. So it doesn't make sense to do things that way. Some lawyers charge flat fee, which is most of the work that I do. As I said, that's not allowed everywhere. So some lawyers aren't allowed to do that. And then also some lawyers do a retainer that's like a general counsel type of retainer. There's two ways you can use retainer. One way you can use retainer is if there's going to be a whole bunch of fees, the lawyer makes you give them, $2,000 or something, and then they just subtract out the fees out of that account. That's one way to do it. Another type of retainer is someone just pays you X dollars a year to like just be on call for all their stuff. It's like a concierge kind of thing. I have only one client where I still do that. I used to do that. I used to have all my clients that way, but I only have one. I think a lot of people want to do flat fees instead. Just something to be aware of, kind of have an idea of what makes sense for you. and what makes sense for your particular situation before you start looking. And really, the big thing you want to do is look at their website, see what the vibe is, look at the kinds of clients they service, look at all the kind of work that they do, and then have an initial call. Sometimes they'll do the initial call for free, and sometimes you'll have to pay money for it. I charge for it mostly so I can give advice on that call, and it's not weird. Because if you just do the 15-minute call and you've paid the money and you we've exchanged that value and that's we can be done. Some lawyers do free calls, so you can shop around and see what makes sense in your particular situation. But that's something that you can think about when you're looking for an attorney. Um, okay, let me look and see. I don't see any other questions right now. I'm actually going to also look in a couple other places to. One of the problems that happens on the doing a live stream is people post questions in multiple places, which I invite, but then I have to go find all the questions. I also want to look on YouTube, on Twitter and see if there's anything over there. So if you have any other questions, please go ahead and post them. Okay, I don't see anything in here. Because otherwise I will then be getting off the call. I do, oh, do you have partnership contracts for startups? Yeah, so I have typically what we're doing for my clients who are starting up a new business where there's multiple owners. We're, I don't know if I haven't done a actual partnership agreement in a very long time because typically what we do is we're setting up an LLC or a corporation, and then for an LLC, you would call it an operating agreement, which is very much like a partnership agreement. The LLC may even be taxed as a partnership. And then for the corporation, you may set up, besides bylaws and all that, you may also set up a shareholder agreement, which is between the two, three, four, whatever shareholders. So that is something that I do. There are templates and stuff for all that online, but I find that the biggest risk for any business that has multiple owners is from the other owners, which sounds kind of um, like ominous, because hopefully you're going to business with people you really know, but that is what happens over and over again. It's not an issue with an outsider; it's that the owners somehow get into some kind of dispute. Could be that they disagree on how to run the business. It could be that one of them has a problem. Like I've had multiple times with clients where one of the business owners becomes seriously ill, um, decides to give away all their stuff because of religion that they joined, maybe a cult, that they become, alcoholic. I mean, all kinds of things can happen. You just never know. And then the business is disintegrates and everybody is wanting to sue everybody else. If you have a operating agreement or a shareholder agreement set up that says what happens if there's an impasse, what happens if there's a dispute, then it makes things, it's not going to be, I'm not going to say easy, but it makes things much more straightforward. You'd rather be in arbitration than you would have to have a lawsuit with everyone. So question, would it include financial splits as well? Yeah. So let's say you have an LLC and you're going to do an operating agreement and there's multiple owners. Then what it will have in there, it'll have how much money or sweat equity or intellectual property each person put into the business, what their membership shares are, their percent that they own. You're also going to have what the voting structure looks like. So if you have two members who both put in 50-50, then it's going to be 50-50, but there's going to be some things for the business that probably each person can do on their own, like kind of daily ordinary aspects of the business, like should we sign this new client? But then there's other things you may want unanimous agreement or 2/3 agreement or some kind of supermajority agreement, like should we get out this business loan? Should we buy this piece of real estate? Things that are much bigger and not necessarily the day-to-day aspects of the business. So you put that in there. You can also even put more complicated things. I've had clients where we drafted vesting. So maybe one or two people are putting in cash, and then another person just is putting in sweat equity. And so we have their shares, their membership, their owner membership will vest over a period of time because they're working in the business and they receive it very much like when you work at a big company and people get stock ownership and it vests over time. Um, I think there, I don't know if a lot of people are doing stock options at big companies anymore. I think that was back in the boom. But people still have stock that invests. So you can do the same thing with a small business too. So yeah, so if you have any other questions, go ahead and post them. Let me go look in the other places. One of the strange things about doing a live stream is the way the chat doesn't keep updated on the things that I'm talking about. Sometimes it can be difficult. I do not do taxes. So I will help people you know, with what their tax situation is in the sense of, hey, you need to go talk to somebody about taxes. But no, I don't do taxes. So you will want, depending on your kind of business, you'll want either a enrolled agent or a CPA or a tax preparer to help you. And that's also another good example of where you want someone who does small business. In small business, kind of similar to yours. So there are some tax people who do, people who invest in real estate and have rental real estate and things like that, but they wouldn't do a business that has a bunch of employees because you usually don't have a lot of employees with rental real estate. So you want to look for someone who has experience in the kind of business that you have as far as the structure of it. That's important. Um, yeah, so like a consulting business, like that's where you just look for someone who's familiar in doing small business that provides services. Um, and a lot of tax preparers now do things virtually, even before the 2020, 2021 situation. People were doing things virtually. It's very easy to do now. You can do e-filing and everything, and e-signatures. So you can look for someone who just resonates with you and how they structure things. Also, sometimes it makes sense to get a tax preparer who also does your bookkeeping because then they can keep all the financial stuff in one place. They may have like a little small firm where they have, a couple people who do bookkeeping, a couple people who do tax preparation. And that way, all the financial stuff is on their computers and they're not having to recreate things every single year when they do the taxes. So it's something to think about. Yeah, so go ahead and post if you have any other questions. Looking here to see anything. One thing I answered an earlier question about the business name. I have a video that also goes over the same question that's going to be out in the next week or two. I can't remember what order I posted them in. So this is where I get a lot of the topics for my videos is just the kind of stuff that people ask over and over again because it tends to be a lot of the same questions that we all have. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and head off. Thank you guys so much for being here today. If you have other questions, you can post them in the comments and I'll get to them later. So have a good rest of your day. See you next time.